to you, Liam, and you tell us all what you've been doing.
Hello, and thank you all for coming this evening. My name is Liam J.H., and this is my dad, Mike. Together we have a small YouTube channel under the name of Liam Hamilton. Next slide, please.
Okay.
But, no,
No, he has to go back.
this one.
So-
Go back.
Yeah, the slides are mixed up, yes.
Slides.
So forget the video.
About 4 years ago, my dad started taking me on Sunday morning walks around downtown Hamilton. That's when we found Bill King was running historical walks of downtown. Next slide, please. After a couple of years of walking Sundays with Bill King and the group of Sunday walkers, it was noticed that as a 6 to 7 year old, I had bigger interest in what I could find on the ground. During the walks, that's when, for my 8th birthday, I was given a metal detector. From the walking group and Bill, I cannot express how thankful I am. It was an incredible gift and a step towards a whole new world of exploring. The right animal for my first metal detector. Next slide, please. Within the first week, my dad and I had a great spot to test it out right near home. In an alleyway near Adelaide Hilda School was a very old carriage house. Once part of Adelaide Hilda's estate, I found my very first find here. A 1929 Canadian penny. Next slide, please. I grew up with the historic St. Clair Boulevard at my front steps, so this was a great spot to test out my new machine. My very first light scent came out of the boulevard. There was an old tree that had been cut down, and where it was standing was still visible. So I detected around where the tree used to be, and that's when I unearthed my first 1919 light scent. Next slide, please.
Take over here for a minute. So most of you know that on August 26, 1895, the East End Incline Railway opened. Also known as the Wentworth Street Incline, this small railway was the second in the city and took passengers on a quick ride from the base of the escarpment at Wentworth Street up to the top of the mountain. The railway stayed operational until 1936. Next slide, please. In this photo here, the same one as before, I circled a house there, and I was asking Bill about this place, and I discovered that a wool stapler named James H. Davis had it built for himself there. But what the a really cool part was that after that, Michael Piggott, the owner of Piggott Construction Company, which was a huge name there in the city, he lived there. And one of their prized buildings was actually the old James Street City Hall. Is what they built. So after the closure and the dismantling of the railway, the stairs were put in place, and we know them today as the Wentworth Stairs. Next slide, please. So the inclined area used to, the inclined area used to have multiple buildings. The superintendent had a house at the bottom of the hill. The ticket booth also stood at the bottom. On the top was the engine house, the boiler house, and the engineer's house. Almost every bit of these buildings no longer exists. However, we did find a very interesting spot in the woods there. I read at one point that the superintendent's house at the bottom burned down. That was around 1906. Significant damage happened, and the rail was shut down, actually, for a few months. A new structure was built, new cars were built, and that was all around 1907. So Lee and I were detecting, and tucked in the woods, right, off east of the stairs there, there's a concrete pad, there's bricks, and it definitely looks like, the remnants of a structure there. And beside that, there's a set of train tracks, and they head north-south. They don't go up the mountain, but they go just north-south, and there's just a small section. And those tracks are 1907, so that kind of coincide with the fire and the new rebuild in 1907 after the fire.
For over 100 years, people of all types climbed this mountain. And over those years could have dropped who knows what. So I discovered that the Wentworth Stairs would become one of my favorite spots to dig and detect. I have found many pennies and other coins here, lots of different stuff, glass bottles to coins to jewelry. It was here in my first week that I had my favorite find of all time. About halfway up the bottom half, my little detector started beeping away like crazy, thinking we might have another ledge sent. I started to dig. It was a ring, and to date my most valuable find. Next slide, please. It's an Art Deco men's ring, a solid 14 karat gold and thick. It has a big piece of jade on it, as well as 5 set diamonds. Next slide, please. Another relic of sorts we discovered at the Wentworth Incline was a trolley handle. It's a cast iron handle that would have been on a pulley. This could have been for a barn door or even possibly a carriage door handle from one of those cars. Used for the incline, it's marked with a patent date of May 24th, 1881.
So we've enjoyed learning about the history of Hamilton from what we can find. We learned about the summer carnival and the old boys reunion from a pin I found in Gage Park. There's a newspaper article over there in regards to it. Next slide. So here are 2 photos we found online about the event. One is just a postcard and the other is the brochure. So in August 1903, one of the biggest public events to ever happen in Hamilton had nearly the entire city participating. Known as the Summer Carnival and Old Boys Reunion, it was held to celebrate the progress our ambitious city had made as we entered the 20th century. Next slide, please. Here's a photo of the carnival headquarters taken from Mark McNeil's article in the Hamilton Spectator from July 2022. Thousands of men and women from Hamilton who had moved away for employment returned to Hamilton and joined tens of thousands of Hamiltonians for the event. A giant midway was erected and a giant parade was held on King Street. The event, which was one of the biggest parties in the history of the city, lasted a total of 4 days from August 17th through the 20th, 1903. The summer carnival started with an illuminated boat procession on the bay. After that, a parade of a different theme was held each day, most popular being the floral theme, as it was the prettiest. Horse-drawn carriages were decorated from top to bottom with fresh flowers, greens, and foliage. During the week, you could find many commercial buildings as well as entire neighborhoods decked out for the carnival. The week was topped off by a fireworks finale at Dundurn Park, which is right here. An estimated 40,000 to 60,000 people watched the fireworks on the bay that night. Next slide, please.
We found this pin in the forest behind Gage Park. Here are the before and after shots. In 1903, the area was not yet a park, but an orchard on the Gage family estate. But tucked south of the Gage Peach Orchard was the Lake Erie and Northern Railway, running east-west up the escarpment above the old T&B Railway. In between these 2 rail lines is a nice thick forest with the Bruce Trail, Bear Trail, and tons of other smaller trails. A few things I found in the forest have stuck out. Next slide, please. Not too far from where I found the old boy's pin, maybe even dropped by the same person, we found some old silver coins. The silver coins we found are pretty common, but we haven't found too many of them, so it was an exciting find. First, we found a nickel, 5 cents, gorgeous piece. The year was 1870. It was clear, readable, and a nice find. In 1870, the Canadian Mint made 2.8 million of these coins, and then just a few feet away, another hole, another silver coin. This second one was a 10-cent piece, 1871 as well. Wow, but we weren't done. With another swing with the pinpointer, another target was found. After unearthing it, we found yet another 5-cent piece. It was dated 1871. Next slide, please. That was fantastic. That was a fantastic day out. 3 silvers and the old boy's pin, plus a musket ball, a necklace, a pocket knife, a modern day belt buckle, and a piece of lead. I think the happiness we had finding these made us forget anything else we found that day. Too much excitement. Sometimes finding a spot to go mountain is just a random place or park. Sometimes we research history books and maps to find older areas that haven't been developed. My dad knows a lot, and that helps. But for the past 4 years, my dad and I have been going on historical walks on Sunday. I have learned a lot. One time we were talking about old parks in Hamilton, and he knew a couple. One was very close to home and easy to get to. This was the long-forgotten Hamilton Pleasure Grounds. It was a park or green space in the mid to late 1800s before becoming overgrown and unnoticeable now. Not knowing what we could possibly find here, at the old and long abandoned park, we tried metal detecting a few times. Next slide, please. The first time we found a lot of garbage, but we did find an old silver 5-cent coin. It's really worn down. It's hard to read. I read 1884, but my dad can't see it. Another time when we were out with Liz, our friend, the big truck, we found a piece of an old lead toy from 1902. It was a soldier with a sword riding a horse, but the horse didn't have any legs or a head, and the soldier didn't have a head either. It was still a very cool find though, even though it's lead. Next slide, please. I have always found it scary when we dig up lead things. We have found a lot, and I always try not to hold it with a glove or try not to hold it with a glove or something, because I was always taught that lead was poisonous. We still dig up quite a bit of lead, and I let Dad handle it. We have some really old musket balls and winged bullets. My dad and I went to an area where we were told soldiers from the War of 1812 stayed and had target practice. There were so many signals on the detector out there that there must be hundreds of musket balls out there. We dug up a few, but there's still a ton more out there. I like the really smashed up ones because they look cool. I've also dug up a few 2 and 3 ringed lead bullets. Those were typically used in the Civil War era up until the 1880s or later. I had a lot of those ringed bullets and musket balls, but I had them all in a bag. After doing a show, I haven't found the bag yet. Digging up bullets and shells is a lot of fun and exciting, but finding an actual gun, that's actually scary. We have dug up a nice old metal cap gun before. We've also found a metal face of one that had fallen off. Next slide, please. Another time I was walking the trail and spotted a real gun on the ground. A real gun. I ran over and got my dad right away. He came over with his friend and we all checked it out. After looking at it, we called the police. I never thought we would have to call the police when metal detecting. The 3 of us stayed and waited for the police officer to arrive. Then we walked him into the forest to the gun. After a couple minutes, he found it to just be a BB gun, a very realistic BB gun. After he checked it and saw it was only a BB gun and a broken one, he actually let me keep it. That might have been the scariest thing while detecting. My Grammy didn't want to have it in the house. One thing with metal detecting that we love and hate is the unsolvable mystery. I love wondering about the person that had something and dropped it. It's interesting, but typically things are impossible to trace backward over a century. A coin could have been handled and dropped by anybody, and there's just no way of tracing it to one spot. On the other hand, sometimes you can make a connection, and it just adds a whole other layer of history. One great example of this is when I dug up an old pocket knife. Next slide, please. Since studying metal detecting, we may have found 3 or 4 different pocket knives, usually not full intact. As cool as it is, we can't trace those back except for one, found in the woods near Gage Park. Just a small, tiny white pocket knife. After a closer inspection, we found the handle was ivory and stamped with RMS Gigantic. At first, when it was still half buried, all I could see was RM and Antic. And I immediately thought it was going to be Titanic. And after that would just be super cool, but not Titanic, Gigantic, which was still super cool. Next slide, please. The RMS Gigantic first set sail in 1908, and it was an ocean liner between Liverpool, Quebec City, and Montreal. It was then turned into a troop ship for World War I. After the war, she switched back and forth from being an ocean liner and a cruising ship. By the year 1931, she was in dry dock apparently, and scrapped in 1933. I don't know who on that ship owned this knife or the year that they received it, but it was so cool to know that it was on a ship and in the pocket or handbag of a passenger. I imagine that they traveled from who knows where to somewhere in Canada, and then at some point in the Hamilton Mountain, thinking about their possible journey is incredible. Was this from a person in first class, a millionaire, or was it the man in the engine room throwing coal? We will just never know and always wonder. Next slide, please. Since I began metal-teching, I have always had a growing list of things I'd love to find. It's my metal-teching bucket list. For a while, at the very top of my list was a horseshoe. I heard of many being found around Hamilton. My friend Mike Relics showed me his collection, and it was incredible. It took a little while, but eventually I found my first horseshoe. Next slide, please. And it was massive. It was in the backyard of an 1860s farm. I have found another one since then, some pieces, but nothing nearly as big as the first. Next slide, please. Another thing that we find along the way is glass bottles. It's really hard to find the ones that are not broken, but sometimes we find some really cool ones. So I collect those too. My bottle collection is growing very big. While out detecting, we have come across a few bottle dumps. Sometimes it seems some houses had a pit for the pottery, for glass and other things. Sometimes it's feet deep of broken glass. It's hard to dig because I don't want to get cut, but around the outside of these bottle dumps, we seem to find a lot of bottles. Next slide, please. Hamilton was home to a few different glass makers in the 19th century. Burlington Glass was on Burlington Street, was around from 1874 until 1897. Blue glass is my favorite. Blue glass is my favorite. Usually it's jars that are blue. Some electric insulators used to be glass. We find a lot of broken ones along old radio railways. Sometimes we get really lucky though, and find some intact. I bought one you can see from a telegraph pole. This model of one of many was produced between 1910 and 1921. Next slide, please. It is really amazing what you can find out in our great city. It will always amaze me, and every find is different. Over the past couple of years, my collection has continued to grow, from old stamped bricks, from buildings to torn down to minerals, to rock collections, and my huge love of coins, from broken pottery to an early 19th century makeup case from Paris. I could spend the next couple of hours here talking about finds, but in Hamilton. But sadly, my time has come to an end. I want to express how grateful I am for the opportunity to speak to you this evening. None of this would be possible without the loving help and support I received from my parents, my Grammy, my good friend Bill King, the walking group, David Simpson, and of course all of you who came out tonight to support us. Good days, good finds. Thank you for coming out tonight. Please join us up at the front view for a view of my finds, and Dad and I can answer questions.
Spectacular.
Yeah, wonderful.
Now, Liam, we've got, to help you in your research, we've got this book, our book, Panorama of the Past for you. We've put in a little book plate in here, presented to Liam on the 22nd of September 2023 with thanks for his talk to the Society, our youngest speaker ever. Robin McKee from our society is going to do the formal thank you here for you.
Well, Liam, that was wonderful. I was finding your artifacts and talking to you. But I have another gift for you, right? This is something that you can actually use in your digging. Okay? It's very sharp, so be very, very careful. You're welcome, and thank you.
So you mentioned a pinpointer, and I wanted you to explain what that was, because I'm not quite sure. A pinpointer?
Basically a pinpointer is basically a metal detector, but super small, so it's like you can put it in your hand, and you put it in your holes that you dig, so it points to, it makes a beeping sound that vibrates in your hand, and that's the direction where your, like, the metal is.
Question here.
No, sit down.
Stay there, stay there, stay.
We've got people who are curious. We've got a question back here. Yeah.
I want to know what your favorite find is.
I don't really have a favorite find, but maybe like gold ring, and maybe maybe the horseshoes. I think there's so much stuff. I don't really know that much. I don't really know what is my favorite.
Thank you, Liam.
Yes.
Thank you for that wonderful presentation. I just wanted to ask you, what advice would you give to someone if they wanted to start metal detecting?
Well, you need a detector first, of course. But then you should try it out in a spot that is like a grassy area. Like a park would be great. But also don't go detecting without either a shovel or a pinpointer, of course, because how are you going to dig holes and how are you going to find it? Also. So, and basically, I'd say read the manual, and it'll tell you what the numbers mean, and over time you'll understand what the noises that it means too. And just if you go into a park, if it has settings and that, I'd say just leave them how they are, just to see what you can find with them. Then try out the settings, Park 1 and Park 2. I'd say if those are on the detector. But that's really my advice. And also, like, just if you just find some garbage in your first hole, don't give up. Like, keep on doing it for at least like 1 or 2 hours, because then you'll be able to. You hopefully will be able to find some actual good stuff, and if you don't, it's a bad spot.
Thank you, you're a wonderful teacher.
I have another question right here.
Liam, where can't you go metal detecting?
Well, the spots that you can't trespass, of course, and can't go detecting. You can, like, as long as you're able to dig there and you're able to get the detector there, you should be able to do it unless it's like trespassing or that. Historical sites and private property, cemeteries, and that's basically it. And also concrete paths. Yes.
Would it be possible if you had a permit to be able to do metal detecting in certain special places?
If you get permission, you would. I'm not really sure though. But if you get permission, yes.
Do different metals make different sounds on your machine, or like, do you know the difference between silver or iron before you dig it?
On my green detector,
Yep.
It actually has little pictures on it.
Oh.
So it will tell you it has 3 different types. You can turn like all of them off except for the last one, because like that, then it will just reset it. And you also can't turn off like the middle one without turning off the first one.
Oh, gotcha.
But on like a different machine, it would just like show a number.
A number?
And you had to memorize them. And you had to like not memorize them really. You just need to like sounds are different, and also
So you have numbers and sounds?
yeah.
Oh, gotcha.
Yes.
What's the deepest hole you've ever dug to find something? Like, I'm assuming not everything's on the top of the grass or something.
No, never.
How far down do you have to dig?
Like it tells you, but usually I don't really dig too deep of holes because then eventually you like can't dig anymore because the hole will get too deep, and also you had to make it really wide. So I never measured my holes. Like maybe like the deepest hole I've dug is maybe like here possibly, like right here.
And Daddy dig some holes too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, one more.
Yes.
Hi, Liam. I'm just curious, do you get any of this stuff evaluated? Sorry, that's where my mind is. Like that ring, did you have
Yes.
it evaluated?
I have had it like kind of evaluated. Like I only know the like possible minimum number because like I'm not going to sell it, so there would be no point in getting it evaluated.
But we took it to a jeweler.
Yeah. And a jeweler told me that the minimum price was $1,500 minimum.
Liam, you're buying coffee Sunday, all right?
Okay, thank you, Liam.